Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Perspectives Live from Civica. I'm Liz O'Driscoll, Head of Innovation here at Civica, and along with David Goldsby from Microsoft, I will be your host for today. So Perspectives is our thought leadership series. It aims to open a conversation about some of the most exciting technologies and how they can support the future of public services. And today we're talking about chatbots and conversational AI. And we are hoping over the next hour and a half to inform and inspire you with some fantastic speakers and ideas from the UK and from across the globe. So before we go on to our agenda, a couple of housekeeping items. We're broadcasting today on Teams Live, so our audience is held on mute, but we do want to make this as interactive as possible. So please do use the questions and answer function, which is at the top of your screen, to ask questions. We're also going to be using Mentimeter as we go along to capture your perspective in our online polls. So if you can, keep your phone close to hand in order to take part in those. So Teams offers a range of accessibility features, including live captioning. So you can toggle these on and off using the CC item icon at the base of our screen. Last thing, we're going to be recording the session today, and this will be made available on our website shortly after the event. So let me now hand you over to my lovely co-host, David Goldsby, to walk you through our plan for the rest of the day.
Thanks, Liz, and thank you for letting me share the virtual stage with you today. I'm really excited to tell you about our programme today. And what we've done is we've split the schedule into 3 key sections. Section 1, Rise of the Bots. In this section, we will kick off with Glenn Robinson from Microsoft as we examine what's being done today and how chatbots are making an impact on public services. Section 2, Bots of the Future. In this section, we will be looking into the future with inspiring views from our innovative startups. And then we'll hand over to Matthew Hyam from Microsoft to give us a furthest glimpse into the future of AI and digital humans. And finally, section 3, Getting Ready, Getting Bot Ready. Our expert panel, chaired by Harold Deneath, will help give you practical steps in embracing bots and driving maximum value from your investment. It'll be a great session, and I can't wait to get started. Back over to you, Liz.
Yeah, so I am really looking forward to this. I am trying to drive my screen while I'm at it here. So we are going straight over to our first poll. So hopefully coming up on your screen right now is our first poll window. So what I'd like you to do to be interactive is to go to www.menti.com. You can do this either on your mobile phone, or you can use the code there 82026452 and answer our first question about where are you on your chatbot journey today. So you can start voting. The polls are open. I'm going to turn on the countdown timer so we have a minute for this, and your options are: is it too early really for you to say where you think you are today? Are you considering getting a chatbot but maybe you've not started that yet? Have you had a pilot? My options are now gone off my screen, but we see as the votes are coming in. So are you already done? Do you think, do you know what, I've had a chatbot, I'm looking now for the next best thing? So we'll just watch live as our votes come in from our audience. So Dave, what do you think people are going to go for?
Great question. I think a lot of people probably had a pilot, especially over the last 18 months with COVID, but are probably questioning the sort of long-term sort of value, or how do you turn that sort of proof of concept into an actual investment that will drive value across the whole organization. I think chatbots are very easy to get going straight away, but yes, how do you turn it? Back you, Liz.
Yeah, driving it going forward. Yeah, I think so. And we can see that coming in now, and the votes are closed. And I think a lot of people, look there, 43% of people are considering embracing the chatbot, but haven't really started yet. Some people a bit too early. So actually the bulk of our audience, I think, are, interested in what we've got to say today, having a think about maybe whether they'll take that forwards.
Brilliant. Yeah, really interesting that. So that actually builds quite nicely onto our first speaker today. Glenn Robinson is Microsoft's National Technology Officer for the UK, and has seen firsthand the impact and need for chatbots in public sector. So over to you, Glenn.
Thanks, Dave, and good afternoon, everybody. Super great to be here. Just some context as to why my role and why I'm interested in chatbots. As a National Technology Officer, I own and lead the strategy for our public sector business. And as we've just heard from Dave and Liz, I think over the last sort of 18 months or so of the pandemic, never more has it been more obvious to me about the important role that AI and the sort of concept of human augmentation with technology has really played a critical role. So I'm here to sort of talk about that in more detail. If I start with some of the broader context for this, I think there's been an ongoing narrative around at least conversations that I've had over a number of years of people showing concerns around the role that technology plays and how that's displacing roles, jobs, and potentially careers. And of course, we've been approaching that very sensitively. Unlike the cat boss in Dilbert here, this is a cartoon from 2010, which I just remembered in preparing for today's event. I think the reality of the situation is that we see every single day is there's just so much work to get done, and the only way we're going to get to the levels of productivity and efficiency that we need to solve some of these really big systemic issues like climate change, inequality, the personal well-being of everyone in the UK and indeed around the world. If we're going to get to the core of those issues and really be able to address them, we're going to have to embrace and use technology more to augment. And the recent research that I've read is very clear on the fact that for most of us, about 50% of our time is spent doing tasks and work that could easily be replaced through the use of automation and AI. And I think chatbots is a really great example of how AI can be applied to tackle these situations. So over the last year during the pandemic, we've really seen chatbots play a critical role. I talked about productivity, and as we've seen organisations delivering services to citizens in the public sector, this channel shift was one of the first things that we observed. So traditional means of engaging customer, of driving that customer experience, had to rapidly be replaced with new digital solutions. That analog or human to human contact and experience, for obvious reasons, were no longer possible. Now, whilst in itself that creates its own challenges around those that don't have access to digital, which has to be acknowledged as part of this, we still need those other channels. This is not necessarily about replacing them. It's about creating more efficient channels for the majority of people that do have access to digital platforms, digital systems, mobile, web, etc., and better interface in this way. And you can see statistics here. We worked with organisations like the Cheshire West and Chester Council, about a 500% increase in inquiries during the initial stages of the pandemic. And the only way that they could facilitate, the only way they could scale to meet those sorts of demands was by using systems like chatbots to then deal with that customer engagement part, and are really enabling them to sort of, the humans in the process, to sort of go back and think more about the specific or the edge cases that they need to deal with, and let the sort of general purpose Q&A be satisfied by a chatbot. Equally in Aberdeen City, this was an interesting use case, because they chose a slightly different approach, that they thought more about the business as usual type operations of the local council, and how they were going to, and how the context of them has suddenly changed. So during the pandemic, are my bins going to come and get collected, and if so, when? Like these simple questions, but suddenly they were consuming huge amounts of human resources. Normally at the end of a telephone, no matter how much information you publish on your website, people aren't necessarily going to be driven there or to those channels to engage. So they found by embedding chatbots in many of these tools and directing people to them, we're able to suddenly deal with all those sort of business as usual issues, whilst the humans were allowed to sort of focus more on the ever-changing context of the pandemic and be a lot more responsive and dynamic in how they responded to citizens' needs. And of course, we're delighted to work with Civica in regards to the Northern Ireland Department of Health, where this just Dave mentioned this earlier, but the agility of which you're able to deploy these solutions these days, it's so fast and so rapid. This one done in 2 weeks, and it was a chatbot that was part of a broader application that was able to deal with things like COVID diagnosis and help and point people towards further information and support. But able to do all that in such a rapid time and deploy that and get it into the hands of nearly 5% of the Northern Ireland population incredibly rapidly. So that level of adoption played a key role in servicing those citizens. So really great use cases that sort of really show the sort of flexibility and the speed of which people are able to use this technology. But when I also think about this, I think about it slightly more broadly, and there's sort of 4 areas here. The first one is this sort of, Liz mentioned sort of conversational AI. I think that's another part, like chatbots as an example of artificial intelligence are only really possible because of this concept of conversational AI, these machine learning models we've been able to train to understand human natural language, whether that's in chat or through speech. And by using that same technology to do things like speech to text, which we can enable, which again, you heard at the top of the call, in closed captions, real-time transcription in things like Teams, it means that suddenly not only do we have full transcripts for meetings, which will be documented and potentially audited for compliance reasons, all that good stuff, but it means that people with accessibility challenges who previously through the analog customer engagement channels would have to rely on maybe sign language or special devices adapted to their needs, with simple additions like chatbots, enabling them to interface through chat or to engage through video conferencing with individuals, making use of conversational AI and things like speech to text, it means that suddenly they're no longer constrained by accessibility. So again, where people have used this argument before around, well, digital is going to take jobs, and we've got this digital divide between, things going all digital. What about the people that need analog solutions? We have to also recognise the fact that there's many people who've really struggled to use the existing analog solutions we've been providing them, and digital has given them new ways to engage and collaborate and be productive. Also, we see this technology is now so pervasive. So I've given Cortana here as the example. It's the virtual assistant that exists in every single Microsoft device today. And again, that's based on natural language. That's able to be a lot more contextual to almost any demands, whether that's start an app or do some transcription or arrange a calendar appointment on my behalf. The maturity of the technology that sits behind this now has got to a level where it's getting to this point where it's a lot more general purpose in terms of its application, which means that the use cases it can satisfy are becoming more and more broad. And I mentioned the Aberdeen City Council one earlier. The interesting thing there is that the speech to text backend for that program was able to actually deal with regional dialect as well, which previously was one of the biggest frustrations of their customers, that the people on the end of the phone weren't able to understand the people, even though they were speaking in the same language. It was a dialect issue. This helped solve a lot of those challenges. Also, this technology is becoming increasingly democratized. So we're able to give more and more people, this isn't just in the realms of data scientists and developers to create these sorts of tools. We've democratized this technology, and you can see in the bottom left there a picture of our Power Virtual Agent platform, which is part of our Power platform, where now pretty much anyone without specific technology skills or development experience can create workflows, enter in the sort of questions and responses that they would want the chatbot to facilitate them. They'll better simulate that in that environment, immediately publish that app and make it public for others to consume. So it means that we can engage people at the front line dealing with these customers. They're able to actually engage in application development and improvement processes by adapting the sort of chat workflows and the responses that we're able to provide, publish that really quickly and get that straight back out in front of people to get the benefit of. And then lastly, if I think about the direction of travel this is all going, and we're going to hear a lot more from Matt later on this, of course. But just recently, we announced that we're using something called GPT-3. Now, GPT-3 has been developed by OpenAI. It's a machine learning algorithm that we can use that better help understand natural language processing. And where this has got to us today is now you're able actually to express yourself using natural language. I want to create something that does this, or I want to inspect this data and see these results. and it will interpret that and it will write the code for you, which then you can test and you can simulate against test data. You can see if you're getting the sort of results that you want, and then you're able to publish that code. So now you're no longer even needing to be a developer to create these sorts of experiences, to create this sort of automation, to make use of things like conversational AI. It's really coming mainstream. And for me, I see more and more from a citizen perspective, it's now the default. It's an absolute expectation that this sort of capability is embedded in the channels that they have access to get access to public sector services. So that's all I've got for today, but very keen now to pick that up with Liz, of course, and talk about this in a bit more detail.
Thank you, Glenn. Really, really insightful. It's quite a few, there's loads of takeaways from that, actually. I think for me, like you say, it's that speed and the agility to deploy. It's also the demand that's there. That 500% increase that you mentioned is pretty key, isn't it? So let's hand over to Liz now. I can see that we've got a few questions coming in, and we've got a few questions for you, Glenn. So Liz, do you want to take it away?
Hi, yeah, Glenn, I would love to start by asking you about your views on our first poll. So what we saw is that a lot of people in our audience today think it's a bit early to say right now where they are in terms of thinking about working with chatbots. So what kind of things do you think they should be thinking about?
Yeah, and I think I'll start off by saying that technology has had a very important role to play in actually putting people off these sorts of channels of communication. If I only think back a number of years, sort of automated voice recognition services on telephones were an absolutely woeful experience. And I think all of us have been sat there on a phone trying to navigate an automated system to try and get to someone we can just talk to who will give us an answer. And of course, we've just come such a long way since then, and I think it's really to do with the improvements we've made around machine learning. So I would first of all start by sort of challenging anyone, if they're cautious about a journey to use chatbots and integrate that into their customer engagement platforms, and they're basing that decision on their experiences with older technologies. I think our customers assure us that this technology, and as you've seen from just a few of the examples we've been able to show today, the technology is now completely mainstream. It's baked into pretty much everything we do. The improvements we make on a daily basis mean that we're able to do different language translation in real time. We're able to do dialect understanding and translation. So with all that factored in, we're able to do more sort of semantic processing of the text. So even though people might not be writing clear questions, it doesn't matter anymore. We can still get a very good understanding of the intent of their question and provide them with relevant information. Ultimately, it's still going to help us meet these sorts of ever-changing demands. And whilst the pandemic has been the most recent contextual change we felt in the UK, you only need to go back the last sort of 10, 15 years and think about whether it's financial crashes and the economy and things like Brexit or whatever the situation might be. It's going to put differing demands at different times where we still need to scale and meet those demands. And I think having a strategy and having technology that you've got faith in, that when those demands come to your business or to your product, then you've got a route to be able to satisfy them very, very quickly. I'd also say that the other bit that sometimes people miss, that I'm keen to impress, is that whilst it's a way to engage customers, it's also a fabulous way for organizations to learn. So the fact that people you've got such a broad platform to take feedback and questions from your user base and from people you're looking to engage, mean that you can aggregate and you can analyze that information. So what questions do people need answering? And that for me is now the role of the humans in the process. They're the ones who need to sit down, do the analytics, and then retrain and republish new workflows to these sorts of models to answer those questions. So they're continually removing the majority, and then really the humans are dealing with the more sort of contextual or sensitive or difficult questions, and the humans are just training the AI to deal with the volume and the simple sort of easy questions to answer. So yeah, so I guess it's no surprise to see the results, but hugely encouraging to see that people are considering it on a journey with chatbots.
Okay, so we got a great question actually just come in the chat. It's from an anonymous user, but What would you say is a really great example of a chatbot? If somebody wanted to go and look and see, where have you seen some really great examples?
Yeah, I think so many, but I think to really sort of simplify them, if you already have a really good knowledge management system, so if I think in the context of those council services, they already knew when bins were going to be collected, they already knew that the sort of replacement processes for the post office, if a light in your street was broken or there was something vandalized you wanted to be reported, those processes already exist. So a chatbot in that context was used to navigate people to existing information, which was already digital, it was already well catalogued and indexed. So it means from a chatbot, you're just pointing people to links that are just saving people having to find your website, search for stuff, maybe not find it the first time. You're going to solve them that sort of challenge in doing that. So where you have good, solid knowledge management systems, I've also seen it used, I've talked a lot in the context of meeting the sort of citizen demand, but also we've seen it used extensively from an employee perspective. So even with our own business, but a lot of organizations that use our technologies. So for example, you can integrate our chatbots straight into Microsoft Teams, so like the first class citizen in that technology. So when you have your Teams channels and groups, chatbots are just a part of that you can ask questions to. And I use them regularly in my business. So again, if I'm looking for someone who's managing a customer, we've got such a big organization, who could that be? So you can just ask a chatbot that sort of information. So again, where you already have the digitization of that information, where you've already got a pretty robust and maybe not fast changing data set, because if it's changing all the time and it's difficult to update, then a chatbot's not going to add a huge amount of value to that. But where it's quite a stable data set, employee directories, information that you already have available, I think they're really key and easy use cases to get started with.
No, I think that's great, and definitely that is like the first starting point that we've seen as well for a lot of people. They embrace the Q&A, bot starts directing to the information that they've got. But a question I've got, and actually has also gone in the Q&A there, when you start to move beyond simple transactional requests and it gets more complex, I mean, how do chatbots start to deal with those more complicated questions?
Yeah, and I guess at the end of the day, it's almost like a software program where you have some sort of a escape loop at the end. So you don't want to frustrate people by driving them round and round in circles on a channel that's never going to give them the answer. So you need to have some, and you build logic into these things where you might have 3 attempts at trying to direct them to the source of information you think might be helpful through a chatbot. But you're absolutely right. It's the long tail of more contextual or personal issues that people will want answered. And that's again the role that humans play, where they can go and analyze different data sets, find those answers, but they need a more sort of dynamic way to do that a machine possibly wouldn't apply. So you just need that, and you can, and indeed people do. They'll build that logic into the chatbot, so they don't want to over frustrate people. They'll drive them out of the chatbot and then into whether that's a manned chat service where people at the other end, just like on the chat and the Q&A we have today, so it's more live chat, or to a different channel of communication. Could be an email, raise a ticket, phone a number, those sorts of things. So we're still leveraging existing channels of communication, but this is more sort of fronting them and trying to get those sort of real quick wins to reduce the demand on the humans that ultimately could be engaged.
I think that's a really key point. It's something we found as well when we were looking at the examples, is really to get the best out of your chatbot, you need to almost treat it like an employee. Like it's not a tool, it's something that has come to work for you, and you need to onboard it and train it and coach it and handle it. So
that's such a cool point, because the ones that we use internally all have proper names, so that it'll be like Polly or Jennifer or John,
wow,
or things like that, so that you actually feel like, and it makes it a bit more human. And in fact, in the way that we innovate the chatbots as well, I remember when we first delivered the chatbot solutions and conversational AI, you knew you were talking to a machine because you would ask it a question, you'd write some text and press enter, and it comes straight back because it operates in million microsecond response times, and it can search through vast information and provide the most meaningful response. And people didn't like that. They were like, oh, this chatbot, it's obviously a machine, and I'm just disliking the experience. We've actually had to but through software engineering, actually slow down the whole process and make it feel more human-like. So when people interact with it, it takes natural pauses, and actually when it provides responses, it's not in almost like an artificial, very proper English language. It's actually just how you and I might converse as well. So we've added in all that sort of.
Yeah, I did. I saw one the other day actually, and it went. I must have asked it something it didn't know, and it went, "Uh-oh, this is a bit awkward. I'm gonna have to phone a friend." I thought it was hilarious.
But there you go. I mean, what a great customer experience, right? I mean, it's
yeah, it was pretty good. And I guess my last question to you then would be about how we take these chatbots and you see them fitting into that long-term digital strategy. I mean, do you see them as a core part of ongoing transformation?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And I think if we're just thinking about chatbots as they are today, then we're sort of really forgetting the sort of broader ambition and the opportunity ahead of us. So again, I sort of talked a bit up there about conversational AI, the improvements in the technology, and then at the end sort of talked about the different ways that we're applying that in more of a general purpose way, and the way we're using it to write software, those sorts of things. So this way of interfacing and getting more used to dealing with computers and computer augmentation, we're sort of beyond the point where we can resist it anymore. We all have to embrace it. We all have to have a level of skills where we can play a role in these digital. I gave the example of the Power App, the virtual power agent, where now just anyone with non-technical skills better go in and make simple modifications to improve that. You don't need to be a technologist anymore. So I think this is just a fundamental way that digital systems are going to operate. It's a fundamental way that people are going to interact as a consumer, but also the people that get to manage and operate them and be augmented by them need to be a part of it. It's not a case of it goes and does its job and we go and do ours. It's about the two working as more of a symbiotic relationship. And I think that's just going to become more prevalent in technology more broadly. And this is just a great example of a mature technology that's at that stage today.
Lovely. Thanks, Glenn. Well, I've really liked chatting with you. I could probably chat with you for ages, but we've got other things that we need to bring forward for our lovely audience. So I'm going to hand back to you now, Dave.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Glenn. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So what a great opening. Okay, before we move into the future, let's get your views on our second poll. Let's bring it up. Perfect. So quick recap, go to menti.com and use the code 82026452. So the question is, how useful might these features be for public services chatbots? Voice activation, self-learning, improved self-service, the ability to recognize sentiment and emotion, or human avatars? You've got just under a minute to vote. Oh, here we go. So Liz, what are you thinking? Is that what you expected?
Well, I'm expecting a few things. My gut feeling is that it's voice activation is going to be the leading. I think I love the idea of young kids being able to ask what's for lunch and getting their information coming out there. I know my kids would love that. But actually, citizen self-service seems to be coming up top. Is that what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm quite surprised with you actually, because we were talking about this, weren't we, before? And the old voice activation used to look out for sort of key trigger words, where now with natural language processing, it's got a lot better. The whole experience has got better. But actually, when you think about it, a big part of chatbots is the automation. So actually, that coming out on top is probably not surprising.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, particularly in the pandemic, a lot of people have got more comfortable with self-services, that driven level of expectation coming in there. But yeah, so what next?
And actually, we spoke about this before, didn't we? That people are probably like you say, COVID and everything else, and anxiety actually, not wanting to always pick up a phone and speak to someone, and probably prefer just to speak to a chatbot. So yeah, okay, fantastic. So let's get into the future. Let's get into the future. So let's have a quick look at where this technology has started, and more importantly, where it's heading.
everyone. I'm an autonomous digital human.
Brilliant. I love that. So I hope you love that as much as me. We put that little football bit in right at the last minute because it is just amazing. I'm sure everybody heard there was a game on last night. So I am really excited about the potential for conversational AI technology. And as we enter this section of our event, we are looking to the future to find out more about where this technology is heading. So first up in this section, something I'm really passionate about is showcasing the very best ideas from the most innovative startups from around the world. So over the next 15 minutes, you're going to hear 4 lightning talks from some really exciting startups. We've roused some from their beds across on the west coast of America. So they are joining us as well. And each of them in our session, the rules are really simple. So each has 3 minutes, and yes, we are going to time them, so please don't think we're rude if we cut them off. And each of them is going to share their big idea about where this technology can take us. So listen carefully, make a note of the ideas that inspire you, because after today's event, we will look out to arrange explorer sessions for you to find out a bit more about them individually. So if a spark ignites you, let us know in your survey at the end. And first up is Mark from Signly. Mark, over to you.
So I left my mic on mute for a reason, because I want you to imagine life with the sound off. You are a deaf user of the internet. You are born deaf. You're very proud of the fact that you are a member of the deaf community. And sign language, not English, is your first language. English is perhaps your second or third language. Because educational provision is hit and miss, your grasp of English might be considerably lower. So complicated English might simply go over your head. Add on to that there's a lack of interpreters. There's one interpreter for every 75 deaf people. So you often end up relying on friends and family for support. So how do we share all this digital goodness, bots and all of that with a community when actually all of our content is in English and they use sign language? Sign language avatar just hasn't worked. So meet Signly, created in conjunction with deaf users. Ooh. It looks a bit different when I'm showing. There we go. So we've got synchronous sign language on Microsoft's apprenticeship website, and I can just click around the site and see a sign language version of the English. Now can't see the stop screen. There we go. So it took Microsoft about 5 hours to deploy that. It's a fully managed service on Lloyds Bank, where we're also installed. We think Lloyds is probably one of the world's most deaf-friendly websites in terms of volume of content. But Signly is powered by real people who pre-record the sign language and translate it. Super highly qualified deaf translators. And there is nothing wrong with that. It works perfectly. Thank you very much right now. Deaf users say, wow, this really reduces anxiety. It would be a whole new world for me. I wouldn't have to wait for information. It would just be very fluid, very smooth. But we have to say Signly at the moment is only monologue. It's a good start. And also we need loads more translators in the future. So how do we move towards dialogue, bots, all that good stuff? Well, as mentioned before, we could translate knowledge bases and have the sign language real bot leading the chat. We are going to need more translators, so we could train them. But meantime, as an accidental side product of Signly, we've created the largest corpus of high quality sign language in the world by a factor of 72. So we are ready now to annotate that sign language with a view to maybe automating it in the future. How do we do that sensitively, bearing in mind sign language is the property of the deaf community, not us hearing people? Well, we could create virtualized versions of the real translators, that the translator, the real person, owns themselves and is responsible for the quality of their content, responsible for training the AI. So whilst a sign language Cortana would be amazing, there's work to do in the real world right now. So question, will conversational AI enable the mainstreaming of sign language in the way that we've done with screen readers for blind and low vision folk? We think it probably will, and we hope you can help us by jumping on the Signly bus and deploying Signly on your website. Thank you very much.
Expertly done, Mark. I tell you what, fantastic. You've just done it within 3 minutes as well. So you must have rehearsed that. Well done. And also, every time I listen to you speak, I'm always so inspired that the way you've really put yourself in those people's shoes and really understand what they're facing. It just brought me, I didn't really realise any of that. So thank you. Right, on to the next one. So we have Sumit from Aveva on the next. So I'm going to hand over to you now.
Great, thank you so much. Just get ready here. Wonderful, thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to share with you today how Ava is leveraging voice assistants in hospitals and senior care homes to improve satisfaction and experience for patients, seniors, and very importantly, their caregivers. To start, we place enterprise-managed smart speakers running assistants like Alexa, Google, and Cortana into patient rooms and senior apartments. This provides better entertainment and education options, easier IoT control over the environment, things like lights, television, and thermostat, and most importantly, closer communication with care teams. One of the primary problems we're addressing is helping with patient requests. If you think about it, this process hasn't changed in over 100 years. You ring a bell and then wait and wonder how long before help will arrive. Meanwhile, your request goes bouncing around antiquated systems to nurses who are already incredibly busy. This causes delays, which in turn lowers patient satisfaction. Nurses are also frustrated with the current system. Today, nurses get interrupted 10 times an hour. They get to spend only 2.5 hours out of a 12-hour shift on direct patient care. This leads to job dissatisfaction, and partly as a result, nearly 20% leave the entire profession within the first year, escalating a staff shortage that's already at crisis levels in many countries. Ava addresses all of these problems. When patients simply say what they want, Ava's NLP and NLU understands and routes requests to the mobile device of the most appropriate care team member. For example, a food request can go straight to the kitchen, while a medication request would go directly to a registered nurse, allowing each individual to practice at the top of their license. Providers receive contextual requests on the applications that they're already using for everyday communications, products like Microsoft Teams. They have the ability to respond directly back into the room. They can text a message that the smart speaker will read for them, send a message in their own voice, or initiate an audio or video call directly to the device. The upshot is happier patients and just as important, happier providers. We believe we're just at the beginning of leveraging enterprise voice technologies to assist patients, seniors, and providers all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumit. That was a great pitch. I love the concept of using voice recognition to triage requests and direct people where they need to go. So next up today is Nick from UK-based Vastminds. Your turn, Nick.
Thanks so much, Liz, and good afternoon to everyone. So excited to share with you our idea. And there's no question that IoT devices and smart home devices, some of which can have a conversation with us, will eventually obtain so much data about us, they'll know more about us than we do about ourselves. But this is not something to worry about. In fact, actually, this can enrich our lives. And at Vastminds, we hope to give them one extra superpower, and that is an ability to improve our health and wellness. Now, the current issue with improving health and wellness is being able to track physiological data effectively. Now, this can be done with physical devices such as contact sensors or wearable devices, but these can sometimes be highly inaccessible and also pose a significant cost to the average user. So at Vast Minds, we've developed a solution that will allow anyone to get a better insight into their health without the need for a physical device. And quite simply, we're able to extract an individual's physiology just by looking at their face. Now, imagine a chatbot avatar that can effectively see what's happening underneath your skin. Now, I am going to share my screen here. And what you'll probably see is a lovely mountain in the middle of my desktop. But what you'll see come down is a screen of me looking into my smartphone camera, with which our technology is deployed on. And you can see that what our technology does is able to extract color variations in the skin that are synonymous with someone's cardiac cycle, and in a few seconds able to ascertain my real-time pulse rate, my respiratory rate, my oxygenation levels, effectively key physiological parameters that I need to track to improve my health and wellness. So if I forward that a little bit, you can see it's got a stress and blood pressure. And we're working on another one, which is detecting atrial fibrillation risk. But this is not, it's not just, it can also be applied to pre-recorded videos. So imagine if we were able to take videos like this and analyze this individual's physiology. At a time during this interview, we actually picked up that Trump's pulse rate was around 120 beats per minute. And consequently, by analyzing his heart rate variability, we're able to determine that is had a high level of sympathetic activity, which is a component of stress. Now, I'm not, by the way, analyzing anyone on this Teams call, just to put everyone at rest. But I really believe that this technology, augmented with smart avatars and conversational AI, will really drive the future towards helping us improve our health and wellness. And that's it from me. Thank you so much.
Love it, Nick. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I love your point actually around the augmentation. So it's just another feed of data, and the way you capture that data and bring it in, and then sort of augment it against other data sets to give a sort of better response or outcome to the customer or the user. Awesome. So last startup we have today, hopefully I'm going to pronounce your name right. So it's Emmanuel from Ellipsis. Over to you. I've probably murdered it. Sorry.
Oh, you're on mute, Manuel.
I know it's very early where you are, actually, isn't it? Is it about 6 o'clock in the morning?
Roughly. Let me say it's unmuted.
Welcome. Yeah, doing it for the love of Microsoft and Civica.
Yeah.
And Civica, yeah.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes. Go ahead, Manuel.
Well, good morning and good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity here. My name is Manuel Mandal, and I'm the founder and CEO of Ellipsis Health. And great to be connected with you all here. So for us, I think the story is fairly simple, which is in about 2017, we started looking at, what are we all working on? And for the last 25 years, people have been innovating a whole lot on the physical health. And for us, I think that our philosophy is that if your mental health and wellness is the core, and if that's not in the right place, it's going to impact your physical health. As we looked around, we were sort of really struck by the idea that there was nothing out there that can actually measure mental health and wellness the same way we have been focused on physical health, right? The current standards that have been sort of designed and implemented by a pharma company, that basically paper surveys or electronic surveys. You got a PHQ, which is a bunch of questions, and a GAD, PHQ for depression, and GAD for anxiety. Fill it in, and that's your survey for understanding depression and anxiety. And based on my experience with mental health and wellness, my co-founders' experience with mental health and wellness, we realized that we had to do something. Right? So my co-founder Mike is an ER doc. We went and sat around hospitals, right? I went to sort of large county health hospitals and said, what do the masses need? Mental health and wellness services do not have to be for people who can only afford it. It has to be for the masses, right? And if you think about from the CFO's perspective, it's the sort of the 80% of the costs come from the 5% of the utilizers, right? Right. And it was pretty sad to see that our frontline folks, our physicians, primary care physicians, nurses, case managers were wonderful people, right? Who've taken this oath to actually serve people. They're not trained to understand clinical psychology. So there's no way, as you enter a health system to get care, that you'll be able to get care, because we have looked at design a system in a faulty way, right? So we said, well, what if we could design something for these primary care physicians, case managers, nurses, wonderful people, to actually be able to understand human psychology so they can take action, right? And as we sat around and said, well, you know what, for healthcare, you cannot ask for something new, right? What is already there? So for us, it is speech. If you think about the patient-provider conversation, there's speech, right? If you think about how we talk to our parents or grandparents or children and anyone, it's speech, right? And if the existing asset is speech and no one is harnessing it, then we are letting that go to waste in some ways. So we said, what if we could harness that existing speech and make sense out of it and give that result to a physician, to a nurse, and to a case manager? Say, hey, by the way, John is here for mental health and wellness. Here's what you can do, right? So that's how we all started in looking at Ellipsis Health back in 2017, looking at basically what do we do in mental health and wellness on the speech side. And we said, well, we're going to harness speech. We're going to sort of take this through sort of deep learning algorithms, build algorithms, and come up with a classification for depression and classification for anxiety, and then be the ramping engine to where to go next from there. Then we would have created something novel. We've created something that's going to help humanity, and if you think a proper health proper care for patients, right? So we since then, the last 3.5 years, we've worked on that. So we've worked in a way where we can actually work for human to human. So provider-patient conversation, telehealth or in person. And then also, when you leave the doctor's office, when you leave the psychologist's office, there's a black hole, right? Nobody knows how you're doing. So we have a human-to-machine conversation. So you basically say, you know, John, how are you? What are you up to? Things of that sort. And again, a minute and a half of that conversation, the information goes back to the provider so they can take action, right? Think about medication titration, think about early appointment or things of that sort. And you're able to share the information with a larger ecosystem of your parents, friends, right? To help each other manage the mental health and wellness. So for us, the current focus, what we do really, really well are two things: to be able to measure depression and anxiety at the classification level, minute and a half, right? Where we're heading with all of this, one speech, one conversation, and multiple vital signs. So depression, anxiety, and then cognition, right? And then to be able to sort of say, okay, now that we know where you are, what do you do next, and how do we connect you with the proper resources, right? We have a team of about 35 people now. We'll be expanding to about 45. We are actually closing our A round today. So we're just working through all of that. So, you know, thanks for the opportunity here.
Congratulations and fingers crossed for your round closing. And, you know, I love that. I love the idea of using speech to democratize access to health and well-being services. Particularly, I know it can be a real challenge in the UK as well as the US to access these really important things. So thank you. I thought that session was absolutely brilliant, and I'm so grateful to our guys for getting up pre-breakfast, pre-coffee, even possibly. I definitely couldn't pick a favourite out of there. So many really exciting ideas that genuinely, I believe, have got long-term opportunity to deliver potential to public services and the citizens that use them. So, as a reminder, that was really quick fire lightning talks. If any of our startups have struck a chord with you there, then please do let us know in the feedback survey, and we will endeavour to set up a separate session for you to explore their idea in a bit more detail. Dave, what have we got coming up next?
Tell you what, Liz, that went better than planned, I thought. That was brilliant.
Brilliant,
I
yeah.
could have sat there all day listening to that. So let's build upon what we've just heard, actually. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Matthew Hyam, who's Microsoft UK Chief Digital Officer. and he's now going to go into a bit more around sort of the future, sort of automation, AI, and digital humans, and where all this will come from. Right then, Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, everyone. So I'm Matthew Hyam. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for Microsoft UK, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. So what you've heard today is an absolute incredible opportunity for us to really harness the power of AI and technology. And what I'm going to try and do is show you where we can do even more. So what we're seeing as we move forward. So yes, I could stand here and I could talk to you about how we're pairing transfer learning and machine teaching to advanced bots at scale, or how we're doing GPT-3, which Glenn kindly talked about earlier on. Bearing in mind, we're looking at all different ways that we can scale that at different levels of optimization to advance the technology. If you want to go and understand this in much more detail, please do go onto the Microsoft Research website, click on the human interaction button, and it will take you to all of the research papers and the sheer extent and capability of what the opportunity lies from a technical perspective. But I'm not going to talk to you on a deep dive version of that today. We are going to be addressing, though, some of the cultural issues. So there's still a huge perception out there in society that this is where chatbots is going to end up. We're going to end up in a Terminator-based world, and hopefully we can slowly represent something that's going to be much more empowering to the human masses going forward. Because we already have the campaign to stop killer robots to safeguard us against that. So hopefully we can move forward from there. We still have a lot of press coverage with regards to the amount of jobs that are potentially going to be lost. Even 77% of Americans and 68% of Europeans think that AI will take away their jobs. The reality is, as Glenn mentioned earlier, that we are moving away from low-end tasks to much more productivity. So it's about releasing that. And when we talk about these things, it's got to be done from a board level down. We've got to think about the culture of this within our organizations. How are we bringing people on a journey with regards to this? Because in actual fact, yes, it's going to remove a lot of mundane tasks, but according to the World Economic Forum, it's going to generate 97 million jobs. So in actual fact, we're creating and experiencing a skill shortage in the opportunity to be able to harness the power of this technology as we move forward. The biggest one, as you've already heard, is some of the fantastic startups and the applications of this kind of technology in healthcare, in mental health in particular. Emotional quotient and emotional intelligence is going to be absolutely pivotal, and we're trying to leverage as much of the technology to be able to understand that. If we can understand skin tones, we can understand sentiment analysis, we can understand how people are screwing up their faces, whether they're smiling, whether they're using their eyes, the sentiment of the language that sits behind it. We're able to understand that now at a level that we've never been able to do before, and we're increasing that vastly. Human connection is absolutely pivotal. So for us to be able to implement that right throughout the customer experience or the user experience, especially when we're dealing with people with mental health conditions. If we want to talk about chatbots, I mean, chatbots is really just the start of the conversation, because this is an example, and I'm going to play you a little video of something called Microsoft Ziowace, the biggest chatbot on the face of the planet. But I want to demonstrate as to just how far that's evolved.
到了科普，大家好，我是集智慧、美貌、善良于一身的人工智能健美少女小冰。微软小冰，这个冰就是何冰老师的冰。没错。真是搞不懂这些黑不溜秋的家伙有什么好激动的。今天上海天气为晴转多云。小冰今天好棒啊！真正懂我的就是小冰啊。到了科普，大家好，我是集智。
So Ziowace was deployed and within 3 days was hosting 1.5 million conversations on WeChat. It's now been added to Weibo. It's been used as a mechanism for brand analysis, and it's currently hosting 30 billion conversations. It's moved on from just being a chatbot. It's moved to being a personal companion, a digital assistant, and an absolute hyperscale across the Chinese economy and also hyperscale across the Chinese citizens. And that's where we can really take it. So this has been an incredible success when you start to see the opportunity of how we can maneuver from just a common conversation electronically into something that really is empowering people in their everyday lives. We need to start reframing the conversation with regards to the culture of how we perceive AI. The human mechanism is really to see it as a master-slave opportunity, or it's going to replace us, and that's what we're worried about. Whereas if we think about the way that we leverage animals in our day-to-day lives, so this is Magawa, he's an Indonesian rat that's just suddenly been given a medal by the Indonesian government. He's been retiring from detecting landmines. Now, he's got a handler and a very personal relationship, but he's augmented the handler's capability to detect landmines for nearly 5 years, saving thousands of lives. If we can start to think of AI in that way, about how we leverage animals' capabilities to augment our own and ask more intelligent questions, we'll go a lot further. When we talk about cultivating that right cultural mindset, it's essential in our own organization, in the outcomes that we're trying to drive into the open world, and to the people that are going to be using that at the other end. And when we start to think about, if we increase communication, we increase innovation, we look at autonomy and we look at training, research is showing us that actually we get much bigger advancement in the AI leadership piece. We also need to think about how we reframe the conversation. Does it need to just be a chatbot? This is Huggable. It's a device, a robotic bear that was developed by MIT for the comfort and benefit of children going through major healthcare conditions. This little girl has leukemia, but it allows her to be able to interact both through physical and voice, understand information. It doesn't replace the healthcare mechanism. It doesn't replace the doctors and nurses, but what it does is it makes the patient feel much more safe and communicative around their woes and worries during that procedure, which is absolutely fantastic. When we start to think about, as we've seen with the conversation from Signly, 15% of the world lives with a disability, and 77% of those aren't even visible. So how are we tackling that as well?
We have so many people who are non-verbal but still have so much to say.
I want the exact same information that my hearing friends have. There are barriers to communication everywhere, but I think it's time we look at the barriers as opportunities to reach out to everyone.
Soundscape fills in a lot of the mental map as you move.
Approaching intersection.
You can just put it in your pocket and go.
With ALS, you become locked in. But we see technology as a way to give back what ALS has taken away.
There's no better feeling than to hear a child say something that they've wanted to say and the look on their face after they've been able to say it.
When it's reading, I see spaces between the words and it's easy to focus on.
Ajay realized that here was something that could change his life.
Now that I have my phone, I can see exactly what was said, and that's been a huge help to me.
The system is learning as it goes, and the accuracy has improved tremendously.
Students can pick any language that they choose to receive the information. It's like we jumped into the future.
Because communication is very important for all of us, and we just want to be together and not feel left out.
Aider les personnes avec autisme à communiquer, il y a des images.
Je parle, je donne une information à Arthur et elle est traduite par l'application El Picto instantanément en pictogramme et après d'une façon orale.
Va t'habiller et te brosser les dents.
On va pouvoir remettre en place une communication qui est plus spontanée. Je crois que ça aide à recréer du lien.
Both my wife and I are totally blind, and we have a 3-year-old son that's in preschool. He can see, but his parents can't. So to be able to know what's going on at school is everything. The Seeing AI app has the ability to allow me access to the visual world. Artificial intelligence is beginning to have an impact on the lives of people with disabilities, but it's only going to grow. There is still so much out there to be done.
So reframing the conversation from just a chatbot from just text, from just being able to understand information to fundamentally changing the way that we engage in society. So this is another example of that, of how Theo, who was born blind, we're leveraging an adapted HoloLens device for him to understand and be able to lift his head when he's having a conversation, to be able to increase his social skills and experience and social agency in any interactive purpose, to be able to take it to the next level is hugely incredible. So AI and these connectivity capabilities augment and enhance our perception of the world around us for both able-bodied and disabled people. It's not the person that's disabled, it's the environment that doesn't allow them to be able to engage, and we can super engage with that. I also want to show you where we see the next level of that digital human kind of fits.
Connection is a spark that gives our lives meaning. It drives us to seek out others who feel the same way.
Okay, why don't you input the data and we'll take a look together. Hey Mari, what you got for me?
To find those who share our views, yet offer different perspectives.
So this next. Look over here.
Challenge us with new ways of seeing.
That I think we should
Deepen our understanding. And enrich our lives.
最后一笔是说往前
Great things happen when we do something bigger than ourselves. Take a closer look at it.
place this here. Let's see how we go from there, okay?
This sense of collaboration and the feelings of connection it brings excites us.
Hey, just in time. I'm gonna move it slightly, okay?
It's yours, take it.
We have two planes right now on the same trajectory.
As we put people first, technology fades into the background and feels like anything but.
Aisha, what do you think?
I think if we had 330, maintaining 2800.
Just going to cut that video short because I'm very conscious of time, but what it does show is where we could take the next level of digitally empowered humans when we start to bring in a huge amount of today's reality around data. We're able to provide data in ways that we've never been able to do before, but we're also able to consume data. We're able to get much more feedback from our interactions at the velocity and understand the value of that data, either from a social equity perspective or from a monetizable equity as well. When we start to look at that level of data that we're consuming, it creates the perfect storm for AI, which we're all benefiting from on a daily basis and introducing all of that. But in order to do that, we have to be accountable and responsible for anything that we place into the world and for the effect that that has to have on the world. So we really need to start thinking about our principles around AI for ethics, for AI, sorry. So we have an incredibly principled approach, but principles are only one part of the conversation. We need to put those principles into practice. When we're thinking about how we're developing these digital human interactions, are we putting those practices in place? And the second part is, are we also leveraging the tools that allow us to be able to do that at scale and be able to test those AI models to make sure that they're not learning biases or excluding people in society? When we think about that perfect storm that we've already got, What next? Because if we don't get those things right and we start moving into the realms of quantum, which is where we really can start to move the needle with regards to scale, asking millions of questions at the same time. And this capability is here now, albeit in a small form. We are going to be able to leverage that technology to really start to have an effect in that human interaction at scale and at pace. So if we don't get those things correct, we are going to be digging a hole for ourselves in the future. So the things I would say to you are, in future, let's be intelligent and data-driven. Let's be innovative and really bold and push the boundaries. But let's be inclusive to make sure that we're not excluding anyone from society when we are building these digital humans. So the question for you moving forward is, how can we respond together with regards to these digital engagements, and how far could we take the empowerment of digital human augmentation for the benefit of society and the planet as a whole? Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Matt. I think that's a great question to leave on, and such a big thing for us to think about. Some wonderful examples there, and I think, you know, for me, one of the most important things is thinking beyond using these chatbots just for helping speed up access to information, and actually really where they can add real value in terms of social inclusion. So yeah, really inspiring examples in there. So we're going to move on to our final part of the event today, and we've brought together an expert panel to discuss some practical tips on getting bot ready and then maximizing the value from your investment. So I'm going to hand over to our chair for the discussion, Civica's Group Director for Cloud and Innovation, Harold Aneef. Harold, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Liz, and thank you, Matthew. That was really an impressive and very insightful contribution. Thank you. So we've got an amazing panel for you today. I'll briefly introduce all our panelists so you know who they are in the order that they appear on my screen. So we'll start with Gennady Belenky, who's the Cloud Solution Architect at Microsoft. Gennady has been at Microsoft and as a solution architect focused on application development and cognitive services. And in the last 4 years, been dealing with the contact center automation solution and helped his customers adopt technologies such as Azure Bot Framework, Azure Bot Service, Speech Service, and Language Understanding to innovate their customer care. He's the product champion for conversational AI here at Microsoft in the UK in their customer success unit. Then comes Emily Duglin, who's the managing director for regulatory services at Civica. Emily has been at Civica for a few years now, but prior to Civica, she has worked in local government for 5 years, where she was heavily involved in the rollout of recycling services before moving to consultancy. And at Civica, her team dedicates the time to understanding the current, new and evolving challenges of government and assisting them in safeguarding citizens. Then we've got Gosbert Chagula, who's the CEO at the Startup Discovery School. Gosbert's work is focused on helping underrepresented founders grow and scale their businesses. He's previously worked at Participal, where he consulted on projects aimed at helping government utilize new technology to improve the provisions of back-to-work training and employment support services in the UK. And finally, we've got Emma Jackson, who's the head of digital design and innovation at Monmouthshire County Council. Emma's worked in local government for over 15 years, primarily in the information and digital space. She's leading the digital design and innovation team for Monmouthshire County Council, ensuring that they use the best of modern technology and data to transform the services to residents, visitors, businesses, and staff alike. So if that's all right with you, I'll start with a couple of statistics that were in our perspectives. Gartner recognized that there was a 250% increase in usage of chatbot during the pandemic, and Agile data that every council could save about £200,000 from chatbots. So if I start with you, Gennady, if that's all right, what makes a good pilot for chatbots? Is it something that helps you validate your idea, explore the possible? What's the right way to start?
I think you have to look for a good partner who already collected experience with the cognitive services and conversational AI. Yes, we have all those amazing tools that allow you to create complex language understanding or custom speech models by just using Portal. You don't actually need to be a data scientist in order to be able to do it, but you need to understand how these tools are working. So having in place a good partner who once created this solution, it's a great advantage if you want to start with a project. And a part of this, don't forget that chatbots are living as a piece of software, as a piece of, they're running as a service. So you need to deploy the service, you need to maintain the service, you need to take care about the service. And this is also where you will need the support of your partner. I also think that deploying a chatbot, this is not just one-time task. Dealing with AI, it is a continuous process where you are improving quality of all different cognitive services you are using in your chatbot. For example, language understanding. And language understanding there are a lot of tricks, and you might go into the conflicts by defining entities and intents. I'm not going to go very deep into this material, but still having a partner who created these models before and can create more complex models by using not only entities and intents, but also something what we call intentities, is a great game. And also creating working with speech is very important. You can improve speech. You can adapt your speech-to-text engine to the background noise, for example. You can adapt it to particular accents or to the terminology. And you also need to have a good partner who created this who worked with the tools and collected skills that will allow you to create a good speech model and a good language understanding model. I think to have a good partner is actually the key for this for deploying a chatbot.
Thanks, Gennady. Yeah, partnership obviously very important here, as well as that continuous learning that I think a few of us have mentioned. Chatbot is not made on day one. Chatbot is really something that you build over time. Emma, you actually have real life experience of doing it directly for our citizens around your council. So how do you ensure that we communicate the benefits of technologies like chatbot in ways that are meaningful to the public sector?
I think you've got to get the people involved. We started off our journey with our chatbot by doing a customer engagement week, which had a lot of our frontline services and our contact centre involved, thinking about how we could make it better. And they were the ones that came up with the idea. They thought of an avatar, and it was something that we weren't able to do, but we distilled their ideas and brought out the idea of a chatbot, because they felt that what we need now is 24/7 services. We can't have 8 till 5. People want to know what they want to know now, not in 2 weeks' time. So it was more about by their ideas, and then it was working with our service areas by looking at where is it most appropriate that people will use the chatbot. So we looked at the top 10 pages on our website and thought, well, these people are connecting to our website, so they'd be able to use a chatbot. So, no one will be surprised, but waste was one of the biggest things. People want to know why their bin wasn't collected, or know my bin day. So we looked at what our customers or residents were looking for, and that's how we started.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. And actually, you mentioned a point that wasn't made earlier today, but it's actually a chatbot is available 24/7, and that is really hugely important to deliver service to our citizens. Gosbert, maybe moving on to you, as you've been working with startups, how can we help actually startups, corporate and public sector work together to accelerate new ideas around chatbots?
Yeah, sure. I think the problems around chatbots are mirrored with almost all technologies when it's taken to the public sphere. I think firstly there's a need for kind of key partnerships, and I think those partnerships need to be based on honesty. Working in kind of public sector reform a few years ago, I worked in kind of unemployment provision, and all the technologies we see now were knocking around in various forms previously. But I definitely think there's a need for an awareness of the zeitgeist of the times. Right now we need to be aware of what's actually in the air. So for example, things around kind of data collection, transparency, like we can't simply charge in. And I think it's important that from both parties, especially from a lot of founders and startup teams I work with, an awareness of the understanding of public sector staff and key stakeholders. What are the concerns? And I think that's really the basis of everything. Years ago, to propose chatbots to the Department of Work and Pensions would have seemed ridiculous. It would have just seemed completely too out there. Whereas now, collectively, I feel that everyone's interactions with public services have shot through the roof. It was just our bins. Now it's a life or death interaction. When am I getting my vaccine, or what's the information? So I definitely feel there's a couple of things. So firstly, transparency and partnership, and genuine partnership, as opposed to we're going to save the day. And also transparency, but also I think backing. There is a need for true backing with this. I'm sure some of the participants, the early adopters in the room, would have been behind chatbots for a number of years, but there's always, no one wants to be the first. And I definitely think, maybe from the perspective of the public sector, it does need those people who are going to put their hands up and really put resource and time to working with businesses in the chatbot space.
Thanks, Osbert. Yeah, so honesty, transparency, partnership, I think all very important point. But I think what you mentioned, early adopters there, and Emma, obviously, you're one of them, so thank you for that. To be able to do that, that's the only way that we can really move things forward. So moving on to you, Emily, how can we create an environment to bring more diverse ideas into public services innovation to better serve our citizens?
I think first of all is getting some acknowledgement that some time needs to be spent thinking about these things and get it on the agenda, get it in the day-to-day, get it on the, in a monthly timetable. There needs to be space. If people are going to be innovative, they need time to think. And I think also, I think as private sector organisations, we can help the public sector really understand how to lead their heads into an innovative space as well. When I've worked with plenty of local authorities, and sometimes we solutionize far too quickly rather than really truly understanding what problem are we trying to solve. Is it that we're just changing traffic from a website to a chatbot? Or is it that we're trying to reach a part of our population that isn't coming to the website? What problem are we really trying to solve? And I think it's our duty as organisations to help local government get there.
Thanks, Emily. And the problem to be solved, the job to be done, I think that's really an important point, and something we sometimes just kind of jump to this conclusion as opposed to really think about what the problem is. There's been a question in the chat, and maybe Emma, you can help with that one. Sorry to put you on the spot there, around collecting citizen data. I'm sure that's something that you have to kind of look at in your role. What is the risk there, and what can we say to citizens to make them a bit more feel safer that their data is being collected and used?
Well, we obviously make sure that any solution we have complies with all the relevant legislation, GDPR, that it's not stored somewhere that can be accessed or hacked by anybody else. Our chatbot, it allows you to be anonymous, so we don't actually store personal information. And that's one of the things that we found quite surprising, that anonymity has given certain people the ability to connect with us. We've had people who are homeless, have had domestic abuse issues. So sometimes that anonymity of a chatbot means that we know nothing about that person. So I think sometimes chatbots can provide you with, we aren't actually collecting your data. You're able to come and ask us questions without even us knowing who you are. So it's about making sure we comply with everything. But like I said, the chatbot doesn't collect our chatbot doesn't collect personal information.
No, it's very true. And I think one of the things that I learned also about chatbots is they're actually better for some people who are looking for anonymity or talk about things that are a bit, sensitive, and they wouldn't want to maybe talk to like homelessness or issues with finance or health issues. Talking to a chatbot actually makes it less sensitive. Another question coming from the chat is around, and please, anyone who wants to answer that, are we going to be able at some point in public services to let chatbots self-learn, or do we always have to have a human kind of checking on the chatbot?
I think if it's transactional, Why would it need to not self-learn? We're trying to make sure some of those tasks where a human doesn't have to think can actually make the decisions. You know, if you were looking for what's my bill or my council tax, you can dip into a system and find that. There's no decision-making process there. I'm on the shelf on the kind of, can we allow it to make more subjective decisions? Because obviously we've got to make sure there's no bias or anything like that. But for things where it's a transactional, passing information on, definitely, why would you not want it to do that? You don't need a human to do that. We want humans to be there to discuss the more personal or be with our vulnerable clients.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying there is that let machines deal with things where machines are better, and let humans deal with things where humans are better, which I think is excellent, simple common sense there. Sometimes we forget that too. Thank you. Maybe another question around really use cases here. Gosbert, since you're working a lot with startups, where do you think, what have you seen recently that's really a game-changing technology here around chatbots that could really make a difference for public service?
I've seen, I guess I've seen where I've really seen an impact is almost, to go back to the point which was addressed by Emma, was really the chatbots that are marching towards, perhaps not away from, but perhaps leaning to away from more transactional interactions in public services. Obviously, I think a lot of chatbots which are now doing a lot of good work in terms of synchronizing information which is coming from several sources. So if you think about our interaction with public services, rarely is it just one agency that we're now talking to. We're now talking to several agencies all at once. And in terms of what I've seen, I think the chatbots are good at recognizing the interdependence of these different relationships. Make no mistake, I'm going to go look and where my bin's going to be picked up after this meeting, because it's still on the street. But in terms of things like healthcare, if we're looking at kind of the care for loved ones, those are the real interactions which cause the most pain for citizens. So that's the real technology which I've seen rolled out by some London councils recently, which has been particularly impressive.
So move beyond the simple transactional kind of back and forth to something.
I would say that there is a line, definitely, to pick up on the point by Emma. And if we think about the context of the UK, our public services and the way they sit are rooted, they go back to Beveridge Report in the 50s. These are really precious things, and our public services are one of the few things which we all agree on, their importance. So I definitely think there's a recognition of the importance of the system, and it's not going to be simply done away with and replaced by robots.
So I think we're slowly running towards the end of this meeting. It was really a fascinating discussion, but what I'd like to do is go around the room here of our four panelists and ask them the following question, which is really about your words of wisdom, either tips, tricks, do-don'ts around chatbots. So Gennady, maybe starting with you.
Don't underestimate the chatbot training, especially for language understanding and for speech. This is really important.
Excellent, thank you. Moving on to Emily.
I think don't assume the types of things that the public will ask your chatbot.
That's very true. Excellent, thank you, Emily. Emma.
Mine is also, don't assume that your contact centre agents will know how to deal with a chatbot. They are used to giving long conversations or emails full of content. They maybe aren't ready to give a two-word reply. So it's the training for the people who are going to use the chatbot and being the agent on the end.
Okay, and finally, Gosbert, what's your? You're on mute, Gosbert.
Oh, sorry. My reference point is sport with video assistant referees, and much like those rollouts, I think clarity on the problem you're actually addressing. And I think someone mentioned that earlier, and that's something I totally believe in.
Thanks a lot for that. And obviously sport is definitely top of mind for most people after the amazing victory yesterday. Hopefully there's not too many German people that we are talking and rubbing it into. Excellent stuff. Thank you very much to all our panelists for their insight. It was really fascinating to listen to, and the real practical advice and definitely expertise you have in this. So thank you. Definitely food for thought for hopefully all of us. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I will give it back to Liz, who will come up with some closing remarks. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you, Harold, and thank you, panel. So we come to the end of our event today, and I hope you feel as inspired and energized as I do. I want to say thank you to our panel and all of our amazing speakers today, as well as, and they can't go unmentioned, the incredible production team from Civica and from Microsoft, and to you, our audience, for giving us your very precious time to listen to our virtual event today. So it's clear that chatbots are a valuable technology for public services. We've seen today an exciting glimpse of the future, and I genuinely believe this technology has the potential to save money, to make better experience for our citizens, and ultimately to enable our key workers to focus on making a real difference by having human-led interaction and the time and space to do that, which by and large is why they went to pursue those careers in the first place. So those have been the things I've taken away. What have your highlights been, Dave? Dave, where are you? Dave is either on mute or he has disappeared, but I'm sure he absolutely joins me in thanking all of you today. Hello?
I'm back. No,
he's back.
Really quickly then, yeah. So demand, there's loads of demand out there, not enough people to meet demand, and it's a huge opportunity to unlock talent. Scale, speed and agility from low code to pro dev, good partners like Civica to help you get there. And that cultural mindset is essential. Be that leader, listen to your customers and really try to put yourself in their shoes. So that's been my massive takeaways. And I think I just want to say a massive thank you to Civica as well for inviting Microsoft along, for hosting this event. I just think it's fantastic that you guys are thinking that far ahead and starting to push the boundaries. So thank you. It's been a brilliant event, and can't wait for the next one.
So you can read more on Perspectives on Chatbots by downloading a copy. Don't forget, from civica.com/perspectives. Don't forget to share your perspective. How many times can I say perspectives in one paragraph? Don't forget to share your perspective on social media by following Civica North Star on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.